Thank you, Minister. The morning sessions are more focused on resources, but it's worth mentioning that in the investable universe of Colombian stocks, there's also very important food and manufacturers like Nutresa and financial services, and a lot of those companies fascinatingly come from Medellin, the traditional Paisa stronghold. I'd be very surprised if there aren't quite a few Paisas in the audience today known for their entrepreneurial and can-do ability. It's my pleasure to introduce Javier Blas. He's the FT's Commodities Editor and General Scoopmeister, and he's going to be moderating the next panel.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul, and ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. Buenos días, señoras y señores. It gives me a great pleasure to be moderating a panel discussion in Colombia, a country that for the Financial Times is so important. You are one of the largest producers of crude oil in Latin America. Obviously, you are a super powerhouse in thermal coal and a keen buyer of your coffee. And that's what I have this morning. Jean-Paul was mentioning Medellin. If all the cities of Colombia, I have a particular interest for Cartagena. And having some fish in Cartagena is one of those experiences that is very, very interesting. So Colombia and natural resources is, as Jean-Paul was saying, is one of the themes of this morning. And when you look at what is happening in Latin America, for example, look at the oil sector, immediately people will mention, Latin American oil is all about Brazil. And if you look at how much crude oil production Brazil has added to the international global market between, say, early 2007 and a couple of months ago, that's where we have the latest data, it's about 250,000 barrels a day. Colombia in the same period added double. Colombia added 500,000 barrels a day of extra production. That says a lot about the good work of Ecopetrol, the regulator, and the ministry. And also a very interesting model of separation between the three different agencies that is working very nicely. And many people in Mexico tells me today that it's a model that others could be using. So I'm going to ask the panelists to join me here now on the panel. So please, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, if you could join me to welcome María García, the president of the National Mining Agency, Arce Zapata, the president of the National Hydrocarbons Agency, and Luis Fernando Andrade Moreno, the president of the Agencia, National Infraestructura Agency. Please. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm not going to go through the biographies. You have all the details here. Just to say very briefly, and this is a constant when you are reviewing the official bios of any senior official at any particular level in Colombia, is that they have a lot of experience on the public sector, but they also bring a lot of experience on the private sector. They know how business works, and they were in business in the private sector before they came to the public sector. And I think that that's one of the reasons that we have seen such a success recently in Colombia. And in the natural resources sector, we have quite a lot of activity recently. I was mentioning oil, of course, as being an area that, and Germán knows very well that, of a lot of activity. But obviously, President Santos has very, very interesting plans for development of the infrastructure, particularly the road, the transportation network in Colombia, that for outsiders sometimes it looks like one of these flat countries, but in reality, you have a hell of a mountainous country, and I suppose that it's very challenging for you to deal with that. And also in the mining sector, again, very interesting developments there, where most recently, for example, the opening of a new port facility, the Puerto Novo, where I saw President Santos and Ivan Glasenberg of Glencore opening that extraordinary facility. That tells you about how international companies have a lot of faith that there's going to be extra production coming from Colombia in the years to come, because also there's a lot of confidence that the global economy is going to continue growing. So that is the two themes that they are getting very interesting. And you see, I'm with this new technology, that is the iPad, and then it keeps shutting down. So I should just go back to the traditional system, that is the paper, and I will have absolutely no problem whatsoever. But Let's talk about, first of all, because I think that infrastructure at the end of the day is the first thing you need for companies to invest. And as I was mentioning, Colombia in reality is a very mountainous country. Roads, let's say that it could be better than they are at the moment. And President Santos had made a promise to spend there a lot of money. But we have not seen much yet happening. Could you give us a bit of a sense of where we are going to start seeing, when we are going to see that investment coming? And in general, what are your plans for development of the transportation network?
Yes, transportation has been one of the weak points in the Colombian economy. Actually, a recent ranking by the World Economic Forum placed us, in terms of quality of roads, in place 126 out of 140 countries.
Not good.
So that's not good. And what is the root of the issue? The root of the issue is that we have been spending too little on infrastructure. For the last 20 years, we've been spending less than 1% of GDP. So our plan is to raise that spending from 1% of GDP to 3% of GDP, which is equivalent of going from about $3 billion a year to $10 billion a year. We're actually on our way to get there. You mentioned Puerto Nuevo, for example, but we also have a significant construction activity going on this year. This year, we're at a record pace. We're going to be finishing 300 new kilometers of 4-lane highways. Next year, we'll probably go to 400. So, we're on our way to get there. Now, the big step is what we call the fourth generation of road concessions. It's a program of about $25 billion US.
Over how many years?
The spending takes over 5 years, so it's about $5 billion per year. So half of the 10 billion will come from that program alone. And the good news is we spent actually quite a bit of time planning this program precisely with these ladies and gentlemen here. María Constanza was the Vice Minister of Transportation when we first developed the program. And with Herman, we developed the whole financing and risk sharing scheme at the time. So it's quite good to see them here again. And well, we started pre-qualifications, the first step in the contracting process. We have a lot of interest from foreign investors. We received manifestations of interest by 20 consortia from around the world, teamed up with Colombian companies. And we hope to have most of this program or this bidding process finished by the end of this government in August of next year.
What has been so far the biggest challenge to deploy the money and to advance these plans?
I think, well, the biggest challenge in the past was simply the fiscal limits. As long as the building of infrastructure was dependent on government money, we could only spend so much per year because we're a fiscally responsible country as opposed to other countries that are not fiscally responsible.
Like my home country, Spain.
Yes. But the program now is basically dependent on private sector money. So most of the infrastructure will be paid with tolls, usage fees, and that's what will enable us to get away from the fiscal constraints.
How has been the response so far for international investors? Because you want the international investors to put money to make an investment for the long-term future of Colombia. On the tolls that you have, you already mentioned that you have discussions with them, pre-qualifications. How has been the response so far?
Well, I think it's very positive. I think several of them are right here. But I think on the equity side, as I mentioned, we have some of the largest developers in the world from Europe, but also from Latin America and Asia, which is, a good sign that the base of investors is diversifying. And from the debt side, the financing side, we're going to depend a lot on the institutional investors, both in Colombia, the pension funds, and also the pension funds and insurance companies from outside Colombia. We're optimistic.
This is a theme that is going to come later when we talk about hydrocarbons and thermal coal. But on on top of being a challenging landscape, a mountainous country, you have a lovely landscape, biodiversity. How is that challenge when you are building new roads, new highways that actually you need, because you need that to speed up economic growth and making sure that you are also protecting the environment? And consulting with people.
Yeah, we've made quite a bit of progress in terms of the environmental dimension. We're working closely with ANLA, the agency that gives the environmental licenses, and all projects that we bring to market have been previously approved by them in terms of the basic corridor that we're using. We're using tunnels, we're using bridges, which in general have less impact on the economy and the environment, than, let's say, the previous designs used to have. In terms of consultations, we're also we do consultations of two types. We always consult the communities that we affect before we launch these processes. And then there are special communities that have special rights of consultation, especially indigenous communities and Afro-descendant communities. We've had some delays in those consultations, but we're working with the Interior Ministry on speeding up those processes and finding a way to...
When we can see results of that speeding up?
I hope we'll start seeing results in the second semester of this year.
Okay. Well, that's excellent news. Now we have, and we will come back to the infrastructures, but I think that we have set up a bit of a scene of what the infrastructure landscape is looking in Colombia. Well, also later we talk a bit about railway, because obviously for the mining industry that's going to be also very interesting. But I want to start touching upon both mining and hydrocarbons. And if I start with mining, this is an area that President Santos have called one of the locomotives of the country. So how is that locomotive going on? And are we seeing the train getting speed up? Or because there's a sense sometimes that while the oil sector is working very nicely, in the mining there's some more challenges.
Yeah, we have more challenges, but we are meeting them. We found when the President Santos took place a backlog of more than 19,000 solicitudes for titles. Now, in this past year, we just sold 17,000 of them. That gives us the opportunity to open again the window for new proposals. That window is going to be open next month, July the 3rd. That is a very good news for the investors. And we are putting together a bidding plan. So we reserve more than 20 million hectares for the bidding process that is going to be launched at the beginning of next year. So we are cleaning the house. We are putting everything in place. We are resolving the backlog. We are doing we are following out all the concession, all the titles with the control and auditing process that giving us a very clear panorama of what do you have in mining. Every single title has been visited, reviewed, if they are paying the royalties, if they are doing the good regarding the environment issues. We are very strict. We are following them up. Some of the titles have been taken away, and we are going to put them in the bidding process during the next year. So the house is almost ready for the party. You all are very welcome to Colombia. They are in the way coming because the baggage they got stopped in the meeting, but they are getting today. We'll leave it with you because there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of information, and what do we have for mining, what are the processes, the legal process, what do you expect to pay in Colombia, taxes, royalties, and some duties regarding to the earliest stage of exploration. So the mining sector is going fast. Not as a Shinkansen, but it's a very good locomotive. And we pave the road, the rails, this is transportation is working on that. We are working together with the agreement we signed with Paz de Rio, the Votarantim company, at the end of the year. They give us the opportunity, they speed up ramp up the process of the railroad system and the center of the country. That's going to be very, very important for the coal, not only the thermal coal, but the coking coal and the metallurgical.
Could you tell us a bit about that? Because we know a lot about the thermal coal sector in Colombia, but surely there are other potential opportunities. And particularly, you are going to have this bidding round at the beginning of next year. Is that what kind of assets or what kind of geologies we are gonna see put in place for international companies or local companies for bidding?
Yeah, something that is very important, and one of the institutional strengthening that are taking place right now is getting the knowledge of our subsoil. At the beginning of this government, we only have 50% of the general geology, 30% of the geophysics, and only 5% of geochemistry. So we, at this moment, are improving the knowledge through the system, to the new entity. We used to have only one entity, and we split it in the National Mining Agency that is managing the resources, in charge of granting the title, is auditing them, following them up, and there's a new technical institution, that is the Geological Service, that are doing the survey to improve the knowledge. With this better knowledge, we are going to build the process, so the people that apply for it, participate in the bidding process, will have better information. What do we have? The potential in Colombia is huge, because the branches that are a big challenge for infrastructure are a very good opportunity for mining, because the perspective gives us that we have the same areas, or very, very similar to the Peruvian and Chilean, so the commodities are there. And you are very welcome to go and participate in the process and explore and develop the projects in mining in Colombia.
So copper potentially could be one area,
yeah.
Copper, nickel, tin.
We have 11 strategic minerals, iron, copper, nickel, coal, thermal, and metallurgical. We have phosphate, magnesium, uranium, silver, copper, as you were saying.
Okay. That sounds very, very promising. My final question before we move to oil and then we can come back to mining is, and again, it's a tension that every country with natural resources is facing, is the environment and the development. How are you bridging those two sides?
Well, we are coordinating with the Ministry of Environment, and we are taking the best practices in the world. We have had the opportunity to go to Canada. I just had the opportunity to participate last week in Australia and Latin American to bring the best practices in environmental. They have environmental issues as well as the communities issues, because they have minorities as we do. And we are working. We're bringing the best practices in Colombia. We say mining is very important. It's one of the locomotives. It's one of the ways to get money to finance the infrastructure, but we will do it in the right way. Protecting the environment, protecting the people, bringing this is the triangle equilibrium between environment, the social, and is what we have done with the agreement we signed with BHP Billington and Votorantim last year. That were one of the more important things we signed. The environmental agreement as well and the social equilibrium. So we're working on that. It's mining, but not to any price.
Okay, that's very interesting. Let's go to the oil sector, where it has been, as again, my Brazilian friends get very offended when I said that they get deeply offended with me, because I said that they are no longer the star of oil in Latin America, and also mentioned that Spain is going to win the World Cup in 2014. Colombia will be on the finals.
I hope.
Germán, the sector, you have witnessed the sector doubling production in about 5-6 years. How that happened? Because you are limited constrained reserves, and some investors have this image of Colombia being a very difficult country to operate. And however, it has been the best story in Latin America in oil. How that happened? What was behind that?
I think that something that you need to understand is that these processes are processes that take quite some time. I mean, you don't get to the point that we are today, from decisions taken yesterday. I mean, a lot of decisions the Colombian government took at the early 2003 when we decided to change the model and split the administration of the hydrocarbon resources to the ANH and the flotation of Ecopetrol, which I think is one of the very significant decisions that the Colombian government has taken over the last decade. And I think the combination of both things is having an independent agency with the capacity of creating conditions for attracting investment, creating a sound and a reasonable model for attracting, foreign direct investment, and guaranteeing the long-term prospects of the projects has been, of paramount to the development that we have reached. And I also think that the change in the model for Ecopetrol, creating this, this mega corporation, which is now investing, and Javier probably will have the chance to talk about this, $80 billion investment plan for the decade. It's a substantial amount. I mean, this is twice as much as the government investment in 2013. So essentially, I think that a lot of these decisions and the whole work that the agency has been doing over the last 5, 6 to 7 years since the open bid rounds started are showing results today. And the emphasis that I want to make there is that I would say that this is an evolution, this is a learning curve. The first thing that we have seen, if some of the companies improving the recovery rates and the revaluation rates of reserves, production has almost doubled in the last 5 to 6 years. The reserves are also growing, are not growing at the same speed, but you know that this is always the balance that you need to get. We have reached I would say the milestone of getting into the million barrels production per day, but reserves are in the 7 years frontier. Our expectations for the next coming years is to improve the reserves level to, let's say, to the 10-year levels.
How that could happen?
I think that, the big challenge is, we are now receiving a lot of the decisions that were taken in the past. Now the important thing is what are the decisions that we're taking today for the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah. And I think that the Vice Minister mentioned some of the challenges that we are facing, but I will say that the main plays are related to the development of unconventionals, and this is, I would say, the main task that we are doing today, creating the legal, the environmental framework, so companies will know exactly what they will be dealing with when we talk about unconventionals. Colombia has taken the decision to move in that direction. So let's say that we have passed the philosophical discussion of whether we are going into unconventionals or not. We are doing it, but we are doing it in a very sustainable and responsible way. And for that purpose, we need to get the whole act together. We need to get environmental regulation in place. We need to understand exactly what are the challenges related to social impact that we're going to create in the areas in which we are going to move on in terms of unconventionals. And I would say that the second challenge, the large challenge that we have, is to develop offshore potential. Colombia made a Caribbean round a number of years ago. I think it was thought more in the sense of acquiring knowledge and making studies, but we need to move forward in that sense. And this is something that needs to be reviewed in a very responsible way, because I believe that the next big bet is going to be offshore development. But it takes time. You need to know the geology. You need to invest some of the money there.
On that, because one of the things that has helping Colombia quite a lot to develop the oil sector over the last few years is that the government made a conscious investment in geological surveys. And your data rooms for the bids were, in general, the industry thought that they were absolutely top level. What kind of data are you going to be offering for shale? Have you done already studies on shale potential, and what the first indications are?
We are. Actually, the agency over the last, between 2005 up to today, has invested around $1.2 billion in acquisition of knowledge. The whole budget for this year is around 200. And essentially, what we are doing today is we are investing in seismic in some of these regions, and in the areas that we are potentially be offering in the open round in 2014. And this is very important, because the decision that the government has taken is we need, let's say, to do pre-exploration studies, so we will be able to offer more comprehensive and integrated information to the industry. This is always about risk, and the level of uncertainty in this industry, it's very high. We were developing the Llanos Basin because we had more knowledge then. Now we are moving into the Valle del Magdalena and and to the Cuenca, to the Sinú San Jacinto regions, and to the offshore side, and to the Pacific side. And what we want to offer to the industry is that, areas in which we don't have much information in the past, that in which we believe we have potential, we will offer, more integrated packages of information. So that will help, risk takers to take more informed decisions, which I understand and I believe is going to attract investment and is going to show, very specific opportunities. We have done in the exploration phase, slim holes. We are doing well drilling. We are getting and grasping a lot of information that is going to be offered in the next year round.
Continue on the theme of shale, because you cannot have a discussion these days on natural resources without spending quite a lot of time about the shale revolution, particularly in the United States. We have talked a lot about the opportunities of shale, but I wanted to talk with both of you about the challenges also. Shale could increase global oil supplies, driving prices down. Shale is a big competitor, particularly in the gas side with coal, and we have seen the United States from being a net importer of thermal coal, importing some of the thermal coal produced in Colombia, to be a net exporter to the tune of 100 million tons. That of the coal, ironically, is ending on the very green Europe. So we are burning. The United States is exporting or outsourcing the climate change problem into Europe, and we are importing it. And in the middle of the crisis, our emissions are going up. With both, I mean, how do you see that challenge of shale? I mean, are you, Herman, concerned about declining prices? Maria, what the companies are saying, ooh, we may not invest because we don't know if the demand is going to be there?
Well, the serious investors are continue their work. There are some people that go around the world and looking for some projects, or they propose some investment and they don't do it. But the prices are putting us a big challenge because the investment, but that's one of the reasons we are moving to other strategic minerals. Mm-hmm. We have a big challenge, a big opportunity for gold, for copper, for uranium, for coltandis that Colombians can tell you. So the prices especially for thermal coal are a challenge for everyone. But the companies in Colombia, the big ones, are facing it very well. They keep investing, they keep doing, especially the environmental investments that are very expensive, but they are doing it. And the expansions are still working very well. So the challenges are there. The prices are touching everyone in the world. But we are aware of that, and we are working with that.
Of course, on that theme of prices, particularly for coal, I mean, prices are low. But I was just last week in Vienna for the OPEC meeting, and I was talking to Minister Ali Naimi of Saudi Arabia, the Minister of Oil. And he's 78 years old and has a lot of history behind him. And more or less, he told me, I have seen everything. And prices go up, prices go down. But he said something, do remember that prices are a bit softer. That we are not $150 for oil, or we are not $180 for thermal coal, but we are still $100. And 10 years ago, we were at 20. And so prices have come down, but still, if you are a company, I think that the prices are still quite attractive, isn't it?
Yeah, the prices are attractive. You see the Wood Mackenzie data, they show that the prices are not going to be as low as $20. So the prices are good, are still very competitive for the investment they have to do business, to have a revenue for the country and a profit for the companies. So.
Herman, what is your view on that? Because a lot of the crude oil of Colombia used to end in refineries in the United States, and the United States with all this new oil that they are discovering. So the companies who are investing in Colombia, even Ecopetrol, may need to look for different markets because of shale.
I think that there are a number of investment decisions that are being taken, to change that. I mean, looking at the Pacific and looking to Asia and the whole initiatives that we have been working on are going to open up, new windows of opportunities for companies. I think that in that sense, the market, it gives you the information. I think it's more challenging for gas than for oil. What we believe, at least in the La Luna, basin, we can offer to the industry have both companies, gas and oil. I think that the price signals that, at least from the information we are getting from the companies, are very stable in the long run. And you just said, we're in the 100 level, so that still pays quite a lot of the investment. So if you have the resources, you have the stability in terms of contracts and legal terms and fiscal terms, you can plan. I mean, you can do business in the long run. So I think, that is in place. It's going to be more challenging in gas because, the U.S. is changing the whole geopolitical, arena, and that's obviously going to influence some of the decisions. But I think that we are well prepared, and Colombia still have the chance. We understand, and from the studies that has been produced, Colombia has the third level of potential in terms of unconventionals, and that's gonna change also the balance of reserves and energy production for the country. So we have a large opportunity there. I think that we need to get it, the whole act together and keep offering and guaranteeing the stability that we have managed to offer to the industry over the last decade at least.
As the opportunity becomes more the Pacific and less the Atlantic, in part because the U.S. economy continues weak, and in part because of the shale revolution, in part because European markets in the Atlantic has been very weak economically, how is the infrastructure development for that tilt that you need for exports going into the Pacific?
Yeah. We had focused in the past on the United States East Coast and Europe. And what you see is that our infrastructure is essentially in the Caribbean and is going to the Caribbean. So now our focus is to improve the infrastructure in getting to the Buenaventura port and a smaller port in the south, the Tumaco port.
Just for those who may not know the geography of Colombia, the Buenaventura port is one that gives access into the Pacific Rim.
Yes. Now, we're making progress gradually, and we'll make significant progress with the new projects. We're building a 4-lane highway between Buga in the Cauca Valley and Buenaventura, which should be finished in about 18 months. That's going to make a big difference for trucking. And we have a railway from Cali to Buenaventura, which had stopped working. And we got new investors from Israel in the company, and it's now working again. So that is good news. We're also making investments on the port terminals. These are all private concessions, very significant ones. And we're also finishing dredging projects in order to increase the depth in Buenaventura. I'm very optimistic about the outlook of Buenaventura going forward, especially as we make these highway and rail links. It's going to take a couple years to have them done, but I think if we look at 2015, we're going to have a different world in the Pacific of Colombia.
Do you see the construction, you think that the port of Buenaventura is big enough and the expansion plans that you have, or do you think that at some point you may need to consider looking for a different alternative for the Pacific?
Well, no, Buenaventura has a lot of room to expand. It's a very large bay. Right now we have 3 very competitive terminals, the Sociedad Portuaria de Buenaventura, Tesehuen, and Semas. But we have new terminals being built. One of the largest Philippine multinationals in ports is beginning the construction of a new terminal. And we've approved the construction of other terminals in the Pacific as well. I think there's plenty of room in Buenaventura to grow. Eventually, we might want to have an additional port facility in the northern part of Colombia, but that has environmental challenges. So I think for the time being, the safest bet is just to continue to expand Buenaventura.
A lot of these, some of these expansions, some of these projects are coming from private money, others are coming from the public sector. How important is for you, for all these projects, that these 2 officials continue to do well, so the money continues to flow?
Well, I think it's a virtuous circle, right? To the extent that there's more mining, we need to build more infrastructure, and to the extent that we build the infrastructure, they can do more mining. So I think we gotta work these things in parallel, especially as we talk about the mining industry in the interior of the country. You were talking about coking coal or met coal. We need to develop the railway links. And I think these railway links will make the industry viable, but also it is the met coal cargo that will make the railway also viable.
All this development has had fantastic price for Colombia, if I may say. The country is developing faster, the fiscal revenues are increasing, but with all of these came use let's say a bit of the dark side, that is the currency is appreciating because the economy is booming. There's a lot of foreign direct investment flows into the country, and the manufacturing is suffering because of that. I will say that looking at this from Europe, I will say, well, that will be a nice problem to have, that because the economy is growing so much, the currency is appreciating, and then we're having a problem in manufacturing. But how do you make sure that that development of the natural resources sector that doesn't punish the manufacturing sector via currency appreciation?
I would say that you will have the chance. I just saw Minister Cárdenas arriving, so I think that's his favorite topic. But let's say that from my previous life, what I can tell you is that the case of Colombia is not let's say, as risky as in other, of our peers, because we have a very well-diversified economy. Even though this industry, the hydrocarbons and the mining sectors are, putting a lot of money into the budget and, and financing a lot of the infrastructure that we're working on, we are talking about an industry that it puts into the economy in nominal terms something around 8.4% of GDP. So let's say that the level of dependency of the total economy is not that big. And I think that makes the difference. When you look at the Chilean case or the Peruvian case, they are more dependent on oil and mining.
Half of the GDP is
and
mining.
That makes quite a difference, because it tells you that you are more prepared to deal with one of these decisions. Now, I think the government has taken a number of decisions over the last couple of years, trying to manage and control, and as I used to say, manage the speed of devaluation. The economy will get more room to maneuver at these levels of the currency. The currency has been, weakening. The peso has been weakening over the last months. I think that the policies start to show in some, let's say, support level for the currency. But it's a good problem to have. I mean, I know that the manufacturers will not agree with me, but I think this is the result of a number of years of doing good policy, having macroeconomic stability, and having the rates of growth that we have managed over the last 5 years or so. The minister will tell you more about the strategy then.
Please.
Maybe a comment. I think the infrastructure that is being built for the mining and oil industries is actually going to help manufacturing. For example, when we look at the river upgrade, the Magdalena River navigation, or we look at the upgrading the railway also in the Magdalena River, it's going to cut by half the transportation of containers to and from Bogota, right? Today, sending a container from Bogota costs about $2,500 or so. Once we have the rail and the river working, we'll probably get it to half the price. So even though the infrastructure is being, economically justified for moving minerals or for moving oil, in fact, it's going to have a very significant collateral effect on helping manufacturing. Because one of the challenges in the interior of the country of Colombia is just being able to communicate in a cost-efficient manner. So I think there's some important collateral benefits from mining and oil in the rest of the economy. It is not always the Dutch disease issue.
Okay. Well, we will hear later on the bigger or larger macroeconomic picture from the minister. But so let's talk a bit more about the oil and mining sectors. And one of the interesting characteristics of the oil sector is the big role that Ecopetrol is playing. As you mentioned, the flotation was very successful. But is that a concern that Ecopetrol play a big role on the oil sector? How do you make sure that the level of play is the Ecopetrol doesn't get any advantage?
It doesn't. I mean, Ecopetrol competes with the rest of the industry in equal terms. And I think that, well, this is something that you need to ask to the industry, but I don't think that there is any other, edge on having an oil and a state-owned oil company into the game. I think it's very important because Ecopetrol has, deep roots in the regions. And when you look at the challenges that you have for developing the industry, the kind of, I would say, championship that Ecopetrol does, in social terms, in environmental terms, is very important. I mean, a lot of the companies depend on, let's say, this strong muscle and a strong tradition. Ecopetrol is a very, loved company in Colombia, and I think it's a very good partner for a number of the foreigners and local entities. And the model that we have created is an open market model. Ecopetrol bids like any other company in the industry, and it has the capacity, it has shown the experience, and I think that you can see the huge improvements that the company has done over the last decade. So I would say that's is the jewel of the crown, but it's also becoming a large Latin American corporation. So I think that the model works. I actually was seeing a report in governance in state-owned companies, and Ecopetrol ranks like number 6 in the world, which is a very impressive number for a decade history.
Herman, I know that you are not responsible for the corporate decisions of Ecopetrol. You have more than enough with the regulator. But let me venture a question. Do you see Ecopetrol doing a lot of investment outside Colombia?
Well, I wouldn't dare to comment on that. But as any large corporation, you need to decide how to improve the returns of the share. And I think that the board and the company has shown very good results over the years. So I guess they are taking the right decisions for the shareholders.
And on the regulatory function that you oversee, how much do you think that the experience of Colombia with 3 entities, a state, partially owned company like Ecopetrol, ministry setting the policy framework, and a very strong regulator, how exportable that model is for the rest of Latin America?
I mean, it is. Actually, a couple of months ago, I had the chance to have a meeting with the regional regulators in Latin America, and I was quite surprised because a lot of them are looking at what has been the experience in Colombia. I know, for instance, that the Mexicans want to look more closely to the model that Colombia has developed, and I think there are a lot of experience to be shared then. From the regulatory side, from the type of contract, the E&P contract that we have developed, and the evolution of the whole process. I mean, we need to understand something that it was done in the 2012 round. Yep. It was to improve the fiscal terms for unconventionals. We need to do and understand that for the offshore development. Mm. And I think that's something that the regional regulators are seeing is that we all have, let's say this is a balance act. I mean, you have the ministry setting policy, we have the agency managing the resource and dealing with the companies and creating the promotion conditions, and it has shown very good results. But you have Ecopetrol playing a lead role in the development of the industry. I think it's a very good case to export. Obviously, you need to understand the idiosyncrasies in each geography, and in particular the legal regulatory terms, because we are not, we look similar, but we are not the same. And that's something that every country will need to understand. But we have the chance to show our model. We're very proud of it, and I think that there are a lot of lessons to be learned.
But it has to be. I mean, while everyone is different, you cannot compare Colombia to Mexico or Mexico to Argentina. It has to be. You have to be a bit proud when you get all these foreign delegations visiting and asking how this works, and Because that's a sign of success.
I mean, it does, and it works for a number of sectors. It's not only for the oil industry. And, I think that Colombia has a very strong institutional capacity. We have created institutions. Something that is experiencing María Constanza now with the A&M is that, we took some of the decisions a decade ago to develop the hydrocarbons industry. We are doing it for mining. We have changed the model for ANI. We have created the ANLA, which is the authority for licensing. And, the government it's reacting, or let's say is preventing the kind of bottlenecks that we need to address. And in that sense, Colombia has been very responsible. We understand the responsibility we have. The National Development Plan has, created and changed some of the very structural issues that we need to address, and we are doing it, in a responsible way. So I think, Colombia has a lot of things to show to their peers, and we are getting a lot of attention from our peers in that sense.
One thing that investors in this room and outside are going to be very interested in is what the plans for the fiscal terms or any new licensing rounds are going to be. I know that it's a bit early on the process, but María Constanza, could you give us a bit of an idea of, is it going to be any significant change in fiscal terms for this new round of licensing for these 20 million hectares of land that is going to come next year?
Well, actually, we are structuring it right now. I was telling before, we opened the stacking process, that is first come, first serve, at the beginning in 2 weeks, actually. So that's something that the industry was expecting from the past 2 years, so it's going to happen. And for the bidding process, we are structuring it. We are learning from the ENH, because it's a very good experience regarding the difference from the industries. But for the fiscal thing, we are not expecting to have any new or surprise, any new surprise.
Herman, what about for shale and offshore?
On conventional, it was decided last year. I mean, we have put in place the terms in the 2012 round. I think that we need to review the deep waters offshore in the near future. We need to understand, the economics behind doing long-term projects in the deep waters offshore. It has to be done, but we're in the process.
It means that you may consider a lower fiscal terms for that area?
I think that we need to understand what should be the right conditions to do long-term development in deep waters.
Yeah, you didn't answer my question.
I don't want to answer. But what I would say is that we have developed, this is a long process. We started 5 years back acquiring, studies and knowledge in shallow waters, and this is the experience we have now. I think, and the companies have shown a lot of interest on going in deep waters. We need to understand whether the conditions that we define about the Caribbean round will work for developing those, because it has to be balanced out. The industry will put investment and will take 20, 15 years decisions based on the fiscal terms that are in place, and I believe they need to be reviewed, and we need to understand how to create that balance so investment will come in and we will create the potential for developing that prospectivity.
We are beginning to approach the deadline that we have for this session, but I'm going to take very soon questions from the floor, so if you could prepare your hands, that would be much appreciated. But a question that is, when we are talking about development of big infrastructure that are in part related to natural resources or talking to regulators in the natural resources sector, I always ask is, what worries there? What is the kind of nightmare scenario that keeps you awake at night? And many times I'm told, look, if China or the global economy slow down, then we have a big problem. So what keeps you awake at night? What is the kind of nightmare scenario that could derail all of these very good plans?
Finding the equilibrium between environment, communities, and the extractive industry. So it's something we have to work every day, not only in Colombia, but in other mining countries. They are facing the same challenges, and we are working through that with the conciliation of different interests, having a very sustainable and supported industry that participate with the social, the community, approaching them in the right way, and being very cautious on having all the measures to prevent the environmental, given the smaller print and the carbon print.
That's very
on
interesting
this.
because we have seen social issues derailing some projects near Colombia, particularly in Peru. Herman, what keeps you at night up?
I think this is an evolution process. I mean, last year I will say that the main concern was on the environmental side, and the Vice Minister mentioned some of the figures. I think, we are moving forward. There's still things to be done. But I think that the more challenging part is how to deal with communities, because we need to understand that this industry has to be welcomed. We need to be, a good neighbor for the communities, and that plays a challenge. This is something that we need to be prepared to, to address in advance, because we want to, to develop these regions in which we have oil and gas potential, but we need to do it in a very sustainable way. I mean, we need to be, people needs to understand that this is bringing welfare, is bringing money to the regions, is bringing development, and I think this is a big challenge. I'm not that concerned. I'm not much concerned about, let's say, the international, let's say, prices and expectations. I think the message from the market is still very strong on financing investment. But I think that we need to, we deal with some of the challenges in the social part.
Probably the fact that the room is full is telling you something about that the industry still considers that prices are quite good for investment, and Colombia is a good place. Is anything keeping you at night up?
Well, I think it's the same concerns. I think the concerns have to do with the environmental issues, but I think we're making a lot of progress, especially on the speed of the licensing, and in some cases on the social consultation issues. Although for roads in general, it's less of an issue than in mining or in oil. It's more an isolated type situation. It's not an across-the-board situation.
Okay, please, questions. We have a question here in the first round, please.
Okay, I have a question. I think this is a good question for all the panel, and it's relevant on both terms. First, on the mining law, and what has been the latest development on the mining law that the court declared non-constitutional, and what is the government activities toward that legislative process? That's one. And second one that I think is mainly focused, like I said, for the three of you, is on the corporaciones autónomas that regulate the environment, these environmental entities that have a lot of autonomy and has been a very difficult entities to deal with in the past. And how is the government and how are those issues being tackled going forward? I know Mr. Andrade mentioned that there's some work in progress, but I would like to hear a little more detail on that. Thank you.
Maria, you want to tell the first one?
Well,
thank you.
They call in Spanish reviviscencia. This law of 2001 is in place completely, and the government took the measures opportunity, putting in the national planning law the environmental issues that were withdrawn when the law 1382 died 1 month ago, 1 more year. So right now the law is in place. We have some decrees, but more for small things, and there is only one thing that is related to the artisanal miners that need to go to the law again. But all the things were taken in for the national planning law, so everything is covered. So we have no worries about what happened with the law 1 month ago. And regarding with the corporation, the autonomy is something that the president is leading, and we are working with the Ministry of Environment to put in place. We are working also in a law that will modify that autonomy. So we would like a faster pace for getting the licenses and getting the permits to do for the extractive industry.
You want to add?
I would probably add just something to what María Constanza said. I mean, regulatory faculties are from the central government. So let's say the law is done at the national level. That's one thing that has to be clear. I think that it requires a lot of coordination with the CARES, with the Corporaciones Autónomas Regionales, so not to get, let's say, a red tape between the national, regulatory frameworks are the regional provisions of some of the CARES. And in the cases that I know, we have been able to, to deal with the issues and manage them. So I don't see, a major risk there. And what María Constanza mentioned is that we are working, the government is working on doing a law project for, to reform the CARES, but that has to be a constitutional change. So, it's a lot of challenge there. So I don't think it's going to happen in the short term because we're coming into elections next year. But that's homework that the government has to do to create a more, let's say, equilibrated kind of balance between the regional corporations and the national government.
Thank you. We have another questions there. Please, the lady in the...
Yes. It's clear that there is investment. It's clear that there are good ideas. But I would like to understand a bit more what is being done on the government in terms of good governance, accountability, transparency. As an investor, I would be quite worried that there are two levels of projects being stuck, not producing the concrete result, such as delays in license, monies getting lost in corruption. So what is the government doing about good governance?
Maybe I could speak about
please.
the case of infrastructure. I think we made a diagnostic of what had gone well and what had gone wrong in previous PPPs in transportation. As a result of it, we made some adjustments in the law, and these adjustments are essentially to stop corruption and make things more transparent. One is the law actually says that we cannot bid out projects without having done the proper studies. It's actually a criminal offense now to bring a project to market without it had been properly studied to avoid many of these delays and problems that happen. Also, the maximum additions to the contracts have been limited to 20% because in some cases in the past we had low bids with the expectation of renegotiating in the future. So with this limit, it's not possible. And renegotiations are also prohibited in the first 3 years of the contract. So what this ensures is that the bidding process will be quite a clean bidding process. We've also agreed with the OECD to be the pilot country for trying the new transparency procedures for big public biddings. This basically entails having a high-level committee at the presidential level that will oversee the bidding processes for these $25 billion in road construction. I actually think that with these measures, very few countries will be able to have a more transparent system. So, we're pretty confident that with these changes, we will guarantee that the bids are serious, that the bids are not based on a future expectation of renegotiations, and that bidders will be able to appeal to the highest levels of government if they feel that if anything is happening in the process with a particular intention, it can be stopped on time.
María Constanza, you want to add?
Yeah, as Luis Fernando was saying, being accepted to go, thanks to the good job of Gabriel Duque has done, Colombia was accepted to apply and to continue the process to become OECD part. And we are also signing and working in the extractive industry transparency initiative. So all the institutionality that the government, the President Santos has created is pointed to have more transparency, more efficiency, and we are joining the good practices clubs and improving them. As the Americans say, they need two to tango. It's not only the government that is doing, we are doing the good job, the job that needs to be done, but the private is also joining these initiatives and signing with us and moving forward to have a more open and more transparent and more efficient processes.
I would probably, Javier, just add something because there was the Revenue Watch Institute just released, the Index of Natural Resources Governance, and Colombia was ranked number 9, which I believe is a very good place to be in a developing country. And I think that we have taken a lot of measures to guarantee transparency and responsibility. Obviously, these are policies that need to be executed in the long run. But I think that transparency is kicking in, and that we have done a lot of efforts in that sense.
There's a question there with gentleman with the.
Yes, any of the panelists can answer it because, as Luis Fernando said, all of them work together in the framework to develop infrastructure. I think one of the important things is what is the impact in terms of growth, and what are the studies telling you that once this ramp up in the infrastructure development is done, what is the expected value of this in terms of GDP growth?
I think in the time frame of the next presidential term, the kicker from this infrastructure program will be probably the most important driver of additional GDP growth. Because if we put $5 to $6 billion a year in additional works into the economy, that's almost 2% of GDP. That's going to have a very significant effect. Most importantly, it's going to have a very significant effect on employment in the countryside, because these roads are built connecting city to city, and most of the work is generated in the countryside, where we have the biggest need to generate formal employment. So I think it will also have a significant effect on helping the economic condition of smaller towns where the roads go through.
I'm going to take another question in this side of the room. The gentleman, please, there, and then I will move here.
Good morning. We heard about the road infrastructure program that is planned. What other plans are there with regards to social infrastructure within the PPP arena?
Okay, it's not my area of competence, but I will give you an overview. Thanks to the new PPP law, we're getting a lot of unsolicited offers from the private sector to work in different areas of social infrastructure. Last meeting I had with the planning department, we had 50 unsolicited offers across the economy. Half of them were on transportation, but the other half were in all kinds of infrastructures related to prisons, related to schools, related to logistical facilities. It's still in the nascent stage in Colombia, because really the PPPs were focused on transportation. But I think as the system matures, we'll have more and more opportunities in that arena.
I'm sure that later President Santos could speak a bit about that and expand on the plans. I'm going to take questions on this side of the room, if that's okay. Do we have a microphone? There's a gentleman on this side, please. If you could wait 1 second for the microphone.
Let me just add something to that.
Please.
I was part of the group that actually worked on the PPP law. And I would say that most of the demand that we were getting when we were having this discussion in Congress, it was clearly related to transportation, but education, health infrastructure, jails, and the whole system for jails was one of the, I would say, some of the areas in which we were getting a lot of demand from the private sector. So I believe you are going to see some of the cases in those areas in which you are going to see social infrastructure being built by private investors.
Okay, please.
In terms of infrastructure development, I got a question, and it is about, well, we know that there are fiscal limits to finance it, and also that you are involving the private capital and the private sector to finance infrastructure. But also, what I would like to know is whether you are involving the financial markets, the local financial markets and international markets to finance infrastructure, like issuing infrastructure bonds and considering infrastructure as an asset class. And the second part of my question is also what is being done in terms of project management to ensure that the projects are actually built on time and don't cost 3 or 4 times more than what they are initially planned.
You want to take, and then Herman, could you add?
Okay, maybe with regards to the cost, that's an easier one to answer because if we look at the PPP schemes that we have, actually most of the construction overruns are the responsibility of the private sector, right? So if there are cost overruns, it's a lower return for them. I think that's the biggest incentive not to have cost overruns. And actually in our concession system in the past, we've had relatively few cost overruns for the country. It's been mostly on the land acquisition side. But the private sector has borne that risk, and we expect that risk to continue to be borne on the part of the private sector. Regarding time, with the new PP law, payments are made on availability of the infrastructure. So again, it's a very strong incentive for the private sector to deliver on time, because the more the project is delayed, the more delayed the payments are. So I think it's an issue of incentives. I think it's an issue of how the contracts are set up and how well prepared the projects are by the time they get to market.
And I think that, I have the chance to work with this topic with Fernando when I was at the Ministry of Finance. And I think that one of the things that we wanted to create is a clear distinction of the level of risk that these projects have. And what we have developed in the financing model was to create, let's say, for different risk appetite levels, the capacity to be taken for different actors in the financial industry. And so we will start from people which is willing to take construction risk, or which is willing to take very little risks for the long-term pension funds kind of demand. And I think that the model we need to prove it, but I think we have priced in all the experience that we have on creating the model. And what Luis Fernando mentioned is it's this unit of I haven't actually think that word in English, but for availability of the infrastructure, I don't know what is the exact name. It is going to create exactly the asset that can be financed into the capital markets, and that's a huge opportunity. We are learning from experience, and I think we have the chance to evaluate what has been done in different markets and geographies, and everything it's in place to test it, and I believe we are going to get a lot of capital markets investment in infrastructure in the next coming years.
Very good. I think we have time for one or two extra questions. The gentleman, please, in this side. The floor is you.
My question relates to the infrastructure again. I've opened a business in Colombia in the last year and have moved resources to Colombia to support the construction activity, and we're having some good experiences. My question is probably one that comes from my customers, which is about are there actions in place within governments to increase the administrative capacity of the government to be able to implement such a large infrastructure plan, again linked to being able to complete projects on time? Or do you feel there are issues in the private sector about how contractors are coming into Colombia and trying to operate, all with a view to performing on time?
Yeah, again, to the issue of timeliness, and going back to the previous questions, the delays that we had in the past were either related to land acquisition or environmental permits. On the land acquisition side, we made a very important change in the law last year to speed up the expropriation process. We're doing some adjustments this year as well. So I think delays related to land acquisition will pretty much disappear. I think the delays related to the environmental licenses are improving as ANLA becomes a better capable institution. It's a relatively new institution. I think we're seeing it also in mining and oil. And on the issue of social consultations, especially with the special minority communities, we're seeing progress, but there's still some risk of delays in sensitive areas where they're located.
Just to drill down on that question that I think is very interesting, you are running very large regulators, and regulators to be efficient need the staff. Do you feel, and particularly in mining, you have a hell of a backlog that you needed to get clear first, and you have almost managed to do that already? Do you think that you have the resources, the budget, the staff needed to carry on? Would you like to see, taking into account that we have some ministers that will take some attention, do you think that you have the budget that is necessary at this moment?
I don't know if I'm biased on this, but because we have this discussion from the Ministry of Finance back then, but I think that Colombia took very deep decisions in terms of creating the institutionality to deal with the challenges that we have ahead. The creation of the ANLA, which is it has a 1-year-old agency, and it just happens in 2011. And the creation of A&M, la Agencia Nacional de Minería, is 1 year old, I believe, is 2011. So I said that the Santos administration took a number of decisions, reshaping some of the institutionality, giving them the regulatory capacity, the terms. And I believe, the financing, we always need more money, but I think, resources were plenty and split within the different institutions that were created 1 year ago. And now we are in execution phase. So we need to get that done, get the right people into the teams, train people, and, get up to speed. But we are starting to see results. I would say it's an ongoing challenge to keep up with what the industry and the private sector is demanding from the state. But we have taken the decisions already.
We are already on our time, but I don't want to let the panel go without asking. I always enjoy at the very last minute to put everyone on the spot. So just in mind that we are doing this conference again in 5 years' time, and instead of London, we have gone to Cartagena. That will be a fantastic improvement. The weather is good today, but believe me, 11 years living in London, I know that this is a rare occasion. So I know that Cartagena will be great, but Bogota will be also good. And we are discussing how the country is doing. So I'm asking for a number. How many kilometers of highway do you think that you have built in 5 years' time?
Well, on the national road system, we have 17,000 kilometers, and our program is to intervene half of them, about 8,000, to go from 2 lanes to 4 lanes and to make them straighter through the mountains. So you will see that half the system will have been rebuilt.
Herman, how many years of reserves do you think you will have by then?
I think that the first challenge is to keep on the 1 million barrels level of production, which we are, this is the year in which we are reaching that level. I think in a 10-year framework, we need to move from 7 years to, let's say, 10 years RP reserves to production levels. So in 5 years, we will be somewhere between 7 to 10.
And how many million tons of thermal coal do you think that you will be exporting in 5 years' time?
Well, that's a difficult question. Let's say 200 million.
Wow, that's a big number. Well, we hope to be able to check that in 5 years' time, that you are not only doing that, but probably better, because the interest from the investors is there. So please join me to say thank you to this fantastic, great panel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Vale.